and welcome to KellyApy, a self-help podcast. Okay, a few years back, I got a call from one of my neighbors who was concerned that my son Liam had separated from the pack of kids waiting at the bus stop. Now, immediately, I go into ultra helicopter mom mode. I've already got my son living as a hermit in the woods with no friends. I wonder, why is he always so sensitive? His feelings get hurt so easy. I mean, he just doesn't behave like normal kids his age do. There must be something wrong with him. What do I do? How do I help him? And then I talked to another mom who told me I should check out the book, The Highly Sensitive Child by Dr. Elaine N Aron. Yeah, I had no other options and little hope that this would help, but I checked it out anyway. Let me tell you, this turned out to be a game changer. I felt that I had finally unlocked the mystery of my child. I mean, there was nothing wrong with him, but everything right. I just didn't know how to handle him. Turns out he is what you call a highly sensitive child. And there's been numerous studies involving this type of child. In fact, 15 to 20% of kids have this advanced nervous system that sets them apart from the other kids. It's an absolutely fascinating subject. And I wanted to do a podcast on this for a while, but I couldn't find anyone who also had the HSC. That's what Elaine calls the highly sensitive child. So we'll be calling it the HSC in the podcast. So I was having lunch with my friend Leslie, and the subject came up. It turned out she also discovered that her child was an HSC. I mean, eureka! I had my podcast guest. So today, Leslie and I are going to share our experience with our insight into this awesome revelation about the HSC child. Okay, please welcome to the show, Leslie. Hi, Leslie.
Hey, Kelly. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so glad you could do this. When we were having lunch together that day and it came up, the topic somehow came up about highly sensitive children. And then you knew when I was talking about, I'm like, wait a second, this is interesting. I'm like, somebody else has a highly sensitive child and knows about it.
Yes, I had the exact same reaction though, Kelly, because I feel as though this is something that I'm thinking about a lot, and it's something that I've done a lot of research on, but I don't often meet people who, we have similar children, but then if we do, and we're talking about the similarities and the things that make highly sensitive children unique, they haven't read the book. So they don't really know the classification of highly sensitive child.
So why don't you just kind of explain briefly what you understand the highly sensitive child to be, and I'll kind of add in anything if I want to add something in as well. So what's your understanding of how the highly sensitive child operates?
So my understanding is truly based on just my own anecdotal experiences with my son. He just recently turned 14. But
so did mine.
He was, that's right. I forgot that they were pretty much neck and neck in terms of age. But I think that I knew, I don't know if this was your experience, Kelly, I think I knew, not of course from the moment that my son was born, but by the time he was home from the hospital for maybe a month, 2 months, and I was getting acclimated and adjusting to being a new parent, and then comparing and contrasting him to other friends that I know who had infants as well, or moms whose children were toddlers, but they had recently had infants. I realized just how different my son was. And so much of it had to do with his sensitivity to texture, sound, sense. Like his sense of smell is very highly developed. It's very keen. Very much, he's very reactive, and he was even as an infant, as a tiny baby, and he's consistently been this way. He's very attuned to his environment and very reactive to what's in it. And that it sounded like for me initially, as I was trying to figure all this out, and I didn't discover the book, The Highly Sensitive Child, until like a year ago. And I would have loved to have had it and been able to use it as a resource when he was a child. But it involved me taking him to a number of doctors, and I was always doing research online and trying to figure out why my son's reactions felt out of step to his peers, kind of out in the rest of the world. And I figured when he was younger, that he was so responsive to He disliked loud noises, anything that was scratchy, any sort of texture. He was really introverted, I guess I would say. He was introspective. He was a quiet child.
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought that that meant that there was something wrong with him.
Yeah.
And so I think initially my understanding was just like, my child is different. He's so unusual from his peers. What's happening? And trying to figure out what that is. So I read the Highly Sensitive Child book, as I said, about a year ago. And I felt like it was like somebody had been reading my diary. Like this
right?
was, and yes, like
it's like the instruction manual, right? It's
yes.
like, here's the instruction manual to my kid that I needed all these years. It's finally it makes sense. Yes, exactly.
Yes. And I wish I'd had it when he was younger, because so much of this I felt like I had to come to of my own initiation and my own understanding. And I didn't realize how many people have similar experiences until reading the book. And that was important to me, because I really did feel like, wow, my son is very different from all of his friends or the kids that I see that I, in his preschool or in his elementary school. So it's a great book.
Well, and so it's interesting that there's actually a science behind this, because I was like, when somebody told me, oh yeah, you read the Highly Sensitive, I was like, yeah, my son is highly sensitive. I can tell you that. But then I started reading about the science behind it. They've done studies about this. It's a temperament, 15 to 20% of people are highly sensitive people or highly sensitive children. I found that fascinating. And then they all shared the same common traits. As I was reading, and I'm like, oh wait, yeah, this is why Liam does this. This is why. And one of the things, Leslie, that got me was it said they don't like tags.
Yes.
HSCs do not like tags. And so So I'm doing my son's laundry, and I look and I was like, why is there a hole in the back of a shirt? And I said, what's this hole in the back of your shirt? He goes, that tag was bothering me. I was like, okay.
Yes. Yes.
But another thing was, like you said, you think there's something wrong with your kid because of how they are. At least I did. I said,
yes,
something's wrong with my child. I don't know what to do. Is he on the spectrum, or is there something going on here, or maybe he's just shy? Is he just, what's going on? It's more than normal. You'll notice it if you have an HSC. You'll notice more than usual things with them.
Yes, I was just thinking that, Kelly, that's one of the things too. I also thought and had so many conversations with our pediatrician and various other practitioners over the years about, okay, obviously my child must be like neurodiverse in some way, but I just assumed that it was autism, or, he was on the spectrum in some way, and, he didn't align with any of the tests, but it's true. There's so much similarity, I think, between highly sensitive children and people who are on the spectrum who experience other types of neurodiversity. Because to me, I was trying to think of the best way to describe a highly sensitive child. When you asked that question, it took me a minute. My brain's warming up, but like you said, it's a temperament, and it's almost like our boys, like they see, think, feel, and experience everything more deeply, positive and negative, than the rest of the world. I mean, so they're not in lockstep with their peers, because everything has a breadth and a depth and a complexity in the way that they are cognizant and aware of it and take it in and process it and internalize it. It's just different than how the average bear does.
Now, so I love how she breaks it down in the terms of the orange sorting. So I don't know if you remember this from the book, but this made total sense to me. She explained that in a normal, like if you're going in an orange sorting plant, there's like 3 ways. They have 3 avenues that the oranges can go down, so they flow quickly. So normal kids have like 3 channels when they're processing information or something like that. Highly sensitive children have like 12. So when all this information's coming into process, it doesn't know which chute to go down. It's still trying to figure out what chute. So, my son would always, as a child, we were raising him like, Ozzie and Harriet. And there are a lot of these millennials that were like, who's Ozzy and Harriet?
Who's that?
But anyway, we were, doing the Brady Bunch, if you will. And so my husband, if Liam would get in trouble, my husband would do the Liam, answer me, and he wouldn't answer. And then he'd say, answer me now. Why won't you answer? And then I would watch Liam, and his face would be he would just be stunned, and he couldn't talk. And it would raise the heat on the situation. And it just, would get so big that eventually he would get sent to his room, and everybody would be in turmoil. And I wouldn't understand, why didn't he just answer? And it comes to find out they cannot just answer right away,
Yes. And that became so important to me. I think that's how I actually ended up seeking out the book, was as, I feel like as parents, we were able to make allowances for my son Aiden's differences in processing kind of all along. But when he hit teen years, that's when I think the combination of hormones and his highly sensitive nature and just kind of what he's got going on from an emotional resilience perspective, it became so fraught. Like you said, it was so challenging, because what he was doing was just withdrawing. He was collapsing inward on himself. So if it was something about something that we needed to discipline him about, or we were talking about something negative that happened at school, or he was telling me that this was this year, he was telling me that at lunch the reason he brings 3 books to school, like pleasure reading books, is because he usually has one that he's finishing, which he finishes in the early morning when he's done with his schoolwork. Then he has one in particular that he wants to start reading fresh or pick up at lunch, because he eats by himself. And so I hear he eats by himself regularly, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is awful. My kid has no friends.
Me too.
And he said, no, everybody, he said, the boys my age are very immature and they're very loud. And he said, they make inappropriate jokes. It makes me uncomfortable. I prefer to just read and eat by myself. But to me, I'm thinking, Mayday, Mayday, I need to contact the school. This isn't right. He's going to be shunned for life. And he's quite happily doing his thing. But you're right. His response to me even questioning him about it is to shut down. Like, he just emotionally withdraws. And so much of what I got out of this book too was just learning how to reframe not just my expectations, but as you said, like when your husband would say to Liam, like, answer me, learning how to adjust sometimes my tone that I use to communicate with him, whether it's something about discipline or it's something positive or it's something we're going to do next weekend, any state of affairs kind of natural order thing, my tone is almost more important than what I say.
Yep. They pick up on it really quick. That's part of their being an HSC, is that any little subtle change in your mood, if you're just even kind of thinking about something, they're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's going on? They pick it up. It's amazing to me. And so I found really fascinating about this I relate it to being like I had a trumpet, but I was playing it like a flute. I didn't know how to play my instrument. I didn't know how to raise my child. I was trying to raise him like a normal child, but it's not going to work. It just wasn't going to work. And so many people tried to raise HSCs as normal. And all it does is, in the end, it can cause addiction. It can cause anxiety, depression, all kinds of problems. So the fact that we were able to catch this early, and then really, rather than shun it or think of it as something bad, embrace it and really relish in the fact that we've got these really exceptional kids. In fact, she said in the book that it's actually an evolutionary milestone. It's raising the evolution of the human species, this type of HSC, which I found fascinating. Yes. So it's like, it was such a relief to see that, oh, okay, so now what do I do? And how do I change? I know I had a talk with Liam. She recommends that you have a talk and explain, because they're just as perplexed as you are, at least Liam was. They're just like, they know they're different. They know, and they think there's something wrong with them. And so And so I had a talk with Liam about, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You've got this temperament called the highly sensitive child. 15 to 20% of kids have it. And it's just who you are. And it's an actual good thing. So understand this is how you're going to be. Did you have that
Yes.
same conversation with Aiden?
Yes. I mean, almost verbatim. I had the exact same conversation. And I think it was such a relief to him because he was starting to kind of tip over into anxiety. And so much of it, he had self-diagnosed. He was saying, oh, I have social anxiety disorder. And so as we were talking through it, and as I was doing this reading and additional reading, we were able to, he does struggle with anxiety, but we were able to kind of get to the meat of the problem. Was not only is he so hyper aware of his environment and empathetic and other people's reactions and feelings, and he's kind of face reading, but then he was internalizing and obsessing about his own differences. So me being able to acknowledge those differences and say, yes, you are a highly sensitive person, and here's what that means, and it's a really good thing, and here's why. Like, you're, as you said about the evolutionary piece, like he is like preternaturally, I don't know if Liam's like this too, but he is super aware of anything, like any sort of danger. Like, I tried to put him into soccer when he was 3. It was like our first organized sport thing, right? And it was not even soccer. I mean, it was like little kid, running around kicking a ball soccer. And he stood in the middle of the field the entire time. It was probably 4 weeks that we did this until I realized he says he's having a good time. He's obviously not having a good time, but he won't tell me what the problem is, and he won't participate. So finally he tells me at 3 years old, he's in his car seat. I think I had to bribe him with like ice cream or something to get him to communicate to me why he wouldn't participate. And he said, Mommy, it looks very dangerous. This is a 3-ish-year-old. And so I was able to remind him of that now at 14 and say, it's a positive. This is a good thing. You've had concerns that you've been expressing about driving for years. You're not even interested in getting your license. I think that's
Liam's
a little extreme.
Liam is the same. Liam doesn't want
to.
He doesn't want to get his license. He'd be very happy not getting his license.
I know. And I'm like, what kid doesn't want to get their license to drive? But I said, but that means you're going to be responsible. You're going to be reliable. You're going to be a safe driver. All of these are positives. So we had almost the exact same conversation. And I found a book actually that I'm having him read. Now, mind you, I'm having to like beat him regularly. I'm kidding. I don't, but I have to constantly, remind him to go back and read it, because it's not exactly pleasure reading for him. But I found this book that I've given to him. It's called Quiet Power: The Secret Strengths of Introverted Kids.
Ooh.
And it really, it's interesting because it uses the term introvert versus highly sensitive. And, I've made it a point to set the expectations with him that I don't want him to think of himself as only an introvert. I feel like that can almost have a negative connotation in some people's mind. And I feel like it's limited. It's really just about a certain frame of responses and behaviors, but they have a lot of great stuff in this book about, well, what does it mean to be sensitive? And yes, you notice all of these things, and how is that a positive? It's all about turning it into a positive.
Name that book again in case your son, because I know I'm going to go out and get it for my son. So, and who's it by?
It's by Susan Cain, and her last name is Cain, and the name of the book is Quiet Power: The Secret Strengths of Introverted Kids. And so it's written to their age level as well. I mean, it's not a companion book. It really is a book for them to kind of help understand, hey, here's why I feel the way that I do, and here are some positives about it. Here's how I can influence the world in a really important way because of my gifts. Like, thinking of it, I try to tell Aiden that it's a gift as opposed to being a curse or whatever.
Yes, but you know what? Sometimes it feels like a curse, doesn't it? I mean, this is not for. I mean, it's such a good thing, but society really embraces strong, bold, the A-type personality. These are not that type of person. They're not going to be that type of person. They are extremely empathetic. They're very artistic, very smart, very
Yes.
loving, good with animals,
Yes. You're just describing Aiden. I mean, it's so
no.
funny. Hearing you
Mhm.
talking, when I heard you talk about Liam that day at lunch, I was like, that is Aiden. I mean,
Mhm.
it's crazy.
Mhm. Well, and now we're in the teen years. And so we're, when I discovered this a few years back, like I said, he was at the bus stop when he was like in fifth grade or something like that, fourth or fifth grade. And so I had discovered this. So I was able to kind of jump in on some of the things she said to do. One, you got to be patient. When he would start freaking out over homework because he couldn't get his homework done, and he would feel overwhelmed, I literally would say, okay, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yes.
You just do it one bite at a time, honey. And and it would calm him down. And I said, let's take a break. If he didn't like food textures, I'd say, okay, let's find a different texture. I understood what was going on. I had to get my husband to buy in on it. He didn't really believe, I think, this was a thing. I think a lot of people don't believe this is a thing until you read the book and understand that, yes, there's studies on this. There's actual science to back this up.
Yes.
There's something to this. And actually, my husband now believes he might even be a highly sensitive person.
Yes. Well, I felt as though the reason that I even got to the highly sensitive child initially, as I was saying, was just years of conversations with different physicians and talking anecdotally to other parents and all of this as Aiden was growing up. But then I also read, as I started reading The Highly Sensitive Child, I ended up buying The Highly Sensitive Person, because as I was reading it, I was like, this was kind of me too. Like, this was me as a kid more so than I am now. I think I kind of had to force myself to be more extroverted and be less sensitive, but he's not going to have to do the same thing. So it's interesting how you can see echoes of yourself or other adults in your family as you're learning more about how your child is highly sensitive.
Yeah. And now, once you understand it and you understand the kid that you're dealing with, you know how to raise them. I mean, literally,
Yes.
she writes, I read, I was reading about our teenagers, Leslie, and actually I was relieved to find out that the highly sensitive child teen, they're not a rebel. They're not going to cause problems.
Yes.
They very much are rule followers.
Yes.
So they're actually pretty easy teens.
Yes.
With that being
I
said,
was,
go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say they don't have a lot of friends. Liam's
Yes.
never going to be popular. And
Yes.
that's just something we have to accept. He's never going to be popular, but all he needs to make himself happy is just a few friends, just a few good, strong, loyal friends. And he's good. That's all he needs. In fact, too many people that would freak him out. That's overstimulation, too many oranges to process.
Yes. Yes. I love the orange sorting metaphor too. But I agree. I'm delighted that he's not going to be a difficult teen, and he isn't already. He's such a perfectionist, and he's so
Yes.
worried about disappointing us.
Yes,
That if
absolutely.
anything, like, his behavior is so constrained. I worry a little bit. I don't want him to go out and jaywalk or get into trouble or start spray painting things. But I want him to feel brave enough to experience the world. And there's a lot of learning that I think I still need to do in that area, how to help him feel empowered and comfortable enough to do that. Because like you said, he's not going to get into trouble. Liam and Aiden, we don't have to worry about them in a lot of the same kind of teenage difficulties that people can find themselves in. But I think about like travel. Our family loves to travel, and we'd love to take them overseas. And he doesn't even like to have a sleepover at his grandparents' house because the environment is different. So the idea of taking him to like Japan is a little far-fetched. And anytime we talk about things like that, he gets really nervous and he starts getting anxious and stressing about it. We were talking about the 8th grade usually goes to Washington, D.C., and they're not doing it this year because of pandemic. They didn't do it last year, but he's told me for a year and a half, he says, I don't want to take that trip. I'm not interested in doing that. I said, well, what if I came with you? And he said, no, I I'm not interested in going
That's a
to
lot.
Washington, D.C. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's like,
that's a lot.
it's a lot of change. He said, I don't really want to take a train. I don't like flying. I mean, it's just,
Well,
he's thinking about all the things.
Liam had to start, he started high school this year. He's in ninth grade. So he started high school, and that was after being isolated with COVID and no socialization. And
Oh
so
my gosh.
it was like, he's just jumping into his studies, but he's having a hard time socially, really talking to people. And I challenged him last night on our walk. I said, okay, I'm going to give you a social challenge, because I think it's good to kind of give them little challenges. I want you to just go up to one person and say, hey, how's it going? And immediately that threw him into, he goes, Mom, I don't think I can do it. And he got sued. He's like, it's causing me a lot of anxiety even just thinking about it.
Yes. My God, we need to get them together. They can be friends.
I know, totally. I'm thinking the same thing. But it's the fact that they have to take their time, get used to their environment. And that's what I got to remember too, is he's kind of getting used to his new environment. And then once things kind of normalize a little bit, that's when he'll really, I think, branch out a little bit. They're smart. They will figure it out. And the helicopter mom and me still exist. And
oh yeah.
And I still worry. And for those women and men out there who think they might have a highly sensitive child, I encourage them to go. There's a test that they can take online that kind of says, okay, does your child do this? And I literally checked all the boxes. I'm like, yes. Like Leslie, I'm sure did too.
Same.
And so that'll kind of help okay, this is the child I'm dealing with. And then you have a new way of understanding how to handle them. Once you understand your child, it changes everything, doesn't it? I mean, I saw night and day once I really understood what I was dealing with, and it didn't freak me out anymore either.
Yes, I think that's exactly it. I think you put that so well, especially about the not freaking out part, because I think once I realized that highly sensitive children is a thing, highly sensitive people is a thing, so I could, realize what it is, acknowledge it, realize it's not just him, and I could relax about it myself, things got so much better, because I didn't feel like I needed to make a capital situation about, this ketchup being too runny. And what does that mean for him 20 years down the road? And is he going to be just like this misanthrope, like horrible, timid and like crazed person who, is so particular about how much peanut butter is spread on his bread? But I could relax about that. Like the helicopter mom, like you said, I was like, okay, it's okay if he needs to have this one brand of ketchup. I don't have to think that that's going to affect the rest of his life. And I can just relax and roll with the things that are important to him. They seem small to me, really big to him. And that's made a big difference just in my satisfaction and happiness. And I'm sure in my tone and interactions with him, because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is exciting. And, I'm telling you what, Leslie, we are going to get our kids together.
We need to.
But I think this podcast will be so helpful to so many people out there, because people don't know what this is. And to understand it, it's fascinating when you really learn about it. And like it's all involved in the brain and the temperament. And, part of it is the environment as well. But I see mothers, and I'm watching them deal with like these kids, and I'm like, oh, I think that's a highly sensitive child. You can kind of spot them.
Yes.
Once you know what you can kind of spot it, like, oh, they look like they got a highly sensitive child.
Yes.
They're part of the club.
Yes.
And so, and then you try and tell them about the book, and they're like, okay, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. I gotta go deal with my screaming kid right now.
Exactly. If I could just carry copies of this book, and if I go to the movie theater, hand them out to the moms whose kids are like, ears covered, shrinking down in their seats, I'd be like, here, that was my kid too. Here, don't go to the movies with yours. Here's a book. Read it. It's great.
All right. Well, listen, we are down to the wire here for the podcast. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you about this, Leslie.
Me
so
too, Kelly.
thanks for taking the time to do this and highlight this unexplored subject with so many parents. I think if we can highlight it, it could help other parents who have the highly sensitive children as well and know there's nothing wrong with their kid, but everything right. So what is your message to the parent out there who has a kid who a little different, they don't quite understand it and they're not really sure what to do? What's your message of hope for that parent today?
I think that my message of hope would be that yes, life can seem and feel very overwhelming. So as a highly sensitive person, I feel that. And then also, parenting a highly sensitive child, you can definitely feel the stressors related to that. But I would say look at your highly sensitive child, or look at your child who is struggling with anything, and try to imagine the vista of promise that's within them, because that's how I'm choosing to look at Aiden. And when he's struggling with processing and kind of how to take on the world, as I want him to see being highly sensitive as a gift, I'm choosing to look at it that way too. So I look at him and I see all the promise that he has to offer in all kinds of unknown and untapped ways. And so that would be my message to the parents out there who listen to this podcast and they think, oh my God, that sounds just like my child. Then it really is a gift. And there's a lot of amazing things that our children can do with these special skills and this special temperament. We're just, all learning more about it every day.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Listen, I'm going to I always close with a quote. So I decided, okay, the quote I'm going to close with comes from Dr. Elaine Aron herself, from the book, The Highly Sensitive Child. She writes, having an HSC is a blessing. Yes, there are some complications because your child is different. But here's the motto of this book: to have an exceptional child, you must be willing to have an exceptional child. You have one. And you definitely have one, Leslie. And I'm so happy that you shared Aiden with us this morning. And I am looking forward to hearing from other highly sensitive parents how this could help them as well. So thanks again, Leslie.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for this edition of KellyApy. If you're enjoying these, go ahead and subscribe. Let's keep in touch. And if you want more messages of positivity, check out my Monday Messages. It's my vlog on YouTube. Just look up Monday Messages with Kelly Mahoney. We hope you have a great week, and we will see you next week for another edition of KellyApy.